Welcome to Maxin and Relaxin with Bob. That's me. Today we're going to be working on this fun little NFT project. We're creating some MP4s out of MIDI files and WAV files. And today we're going to look at some compositing as part of this system. We're going to look at luma keying using jit.pix. We're going to look at overlaying text using jit.gl.text2d. We're going to look at readback, where we take a jit.world and we generate something on the GPU with some GL objects, and we then turn that into a matrices and composite it. And we're going to look at some quirkiness with alpha and some gotchas that might pop up when you're working with jit.pix objects and you're doing some fun filtering. So let's get to it. Here we are back working on this little NFT project. So the project involves generating a whole bunch of looping MP4s, and they're produced out of MIDI files and audio files. So we're using Max, we're giving it some MIDI, we're giving it some WAV files, it's producing some individual parameterized looping MP4s for us. This is sort of where we're at the moment. Cool. So we got this little grid, and it's lighting up in response to MIDI notes, and we've got MP4s that loop as well as I can get them to loop thus far on a variety of browsers. Looping MP4s is actually pretty challenging to get a seamlessly looping MP4, and I think there are some things that we can do to make that loop less noticeable, which I might talk about as this project progresses. I've got some ideas of how we can approach that. So what I'd like to do today is I've been working in over here in Affinity Photo, I think it's called, just to mock up some of the graphic design that I'd like to implement. So really I want to be able to introduce some gradient backgrounds, and I want to put some text down the bottom of these, and everyone is going to have some procedurally generated text, so that becomes part of the procedural generation. So here in Max, what I've done is I brought in the background here as when you drag an image directly into your Max patch, it comes in as an fpic object, I believe. And you can hit bang and that'll output a matrix for you. So we can use that as a matrix source. And what I'd like to do is take my P window. Do is take this matrix here. So this is our little cell that is being driven by MIDI notes. I'd like to mask out this image and overlay it over the top of this image. So to do that, we're going to use the jit.pix object. So the jit.pix object and the jit.glpix object are probably my two favorite objects. They're sort of a Swiss Army knife, and once you can work with them, they make a lot of the other jitter objects, at least they offer an alternative to a lot of the jitter objects. As I prefer working in jit.pix because I don't need to remember the name of a particular jitter object. I can accomplish what it's doing in the jit.pix object. So here's basically our source matrices, right? We've got this, which will be our foreground, sort of the color of our cells. Then we've got our background, and then we've got this mask. So what I'd like to do is have the background show where the mask here is white, and my animated cells here show where the mask is black. So we're going to use jit.pix to do that. We're essentially creating a luma key here. When we're working with video, sometimes we talk about keying. So you might have heard of like a chroma key. That might be like a green screen or a blue screen. With a luma key, we're talking about luminance keying. So how perceptually dark or light something is can be used to blend between two different objects. Oh, sorry, two different images. We're doing a very basic version of that here. Basic is good. Basic is good. So let's have a think about what we want to achieve. I've got 3 images, so I'm going to need 3 inputs. I'm going to create another input in 3. And we're going to have our foreground, our background, and our mask. So let's label these. This is going to be my mask. I think this one will be my foreground. This one will be my background. Okay, we've got our foreground, our background, and our mask. And what we're going to do is we're going to read in our mask image. We're going to look at that pixel in our mask image. For every single pixel, we're going to look at the pixel in our mask image. And if it's white, we're going to use our background texture. And if it's black, we're going to use our foreground texture. Pretty simple. So what we're going to do to do that is use this object. This is the ternary object. Sometimes a conditional. What do they call it? Help. I call it a ternary object. So this first inlet is the condition to test. So we're going to put our mask into that. And if it's true, it's going to use this input, and if it's false, it's going to use this input. So by true, they this means, is it white? And if it's false, then that's black. So our background is going to be, whenever a pixel is white, that's going to be our background. Might need to work. It's our background. If it's false, it's our foreground. That'll work. I'll zoom out, plug this back in. Our foreground, background, and our mask. Any video content to do this can be really quite an effective technique. I'm also going to bang here on this fpic. This fpic is here as a placeholder at the moment. I'll be loading in dynamic backgrounds, but for the moment, bang. We need to bang this manually. That basically outputs our matrix into our jit.pix, so it's got something to work with. If we didn't do that, our jit.pix, even though our fpic is connected, our jit.pix wouldn't have received anything from it yet. So I think we're good to go. Oops. Go. Oh. Okay. That's so this is the P window we're looking at, and it's connected to the wrong thing. We want to be previewing from this point in our signal chain. So I'm going to hold shift and drag my P window out, and then drag it over here and release my click. And now I've sort of uninserted and reinserted the P window in a different point in my signal chain. Okay, looking better. It's not quite what we want. What's going on here? Okay, I think I just needed to bang that fpic again. Okay, looks pretty good. So there's LumaKeying. There is LumaKeying. One step in this process. The next thing I want to do is overlay some text here. I'm going to want to overlay some other images as well, but I'm just going to look at text for the moment. Thus far, you'll notice that all of these image cables that I'm working with, or all of these patch cables, they're green. That means we're working with matrices. There's another way of passing image data around in Max. That's using textures, so they'll be like blue patch cables that you might see in some patches. That means we're working with GL objects. We're working on the graphics card. I've been keeping things quite simple because I'm working with very low resolution image data, and so it's kind of nice to be working just with matrices. It's simple. There's sort of less I don't know, less technology. It's more like banging two sticks together than programming in OpenGL. But we're gonna discard our sticks and head a little bit into OpenGL land, but only because we have to. Right? The reason we have to is because I want to work with text, and ideally what I'd like to do is overlay matrices data with text. I don't think there is a matrix operator for working with text in Max. So we need to step into OpenGL land. Whenever we work with OpenGL objects, that is objects that start with jit.gl, we need a GL context, and we create that with a jit.world object. .world object sort of contains within it a jit.render object, a jit.window object. I think it's got a jit.gl.camera object and jit.gl.cornerpin object. Maybe it's got lights, I'm not sure, or a handle, I'm not sure. But it's got all these other objects that we used to need to patch together manually. Now it's all done for us in jit.world. And I'm going to specify a couple of arguments here. I'm going to say that it is enabled, so I don't need to send it a toggle to turn it on. And what else do I want? Set it to float for the moment. That'll just put our window on the top of our screen like this. You notice it's gone a little bit of a lighter grey as well. That means that it's working. That means it's working. I think if I turn it off, it should go black again. It might not. No, it won't. Doesn't matter. If it's sort of this lightish grey or darkish grey, we know it's working. There is one other thing that I want to do actually. So at the moment, I'm working with matrices, and I want to continue working with matrices. So I want to take my jit.world, turn it into a matrix. And I'm also working with quite low resolution matrices. So I'm going to set the dimensions of this to 340 by 340, which is the size of the matrices I'm using in the rest of my patch. And I'm going to set, what's the other thing I was going to do? Matrix. No, that's not it. It is enable. There it is, output matrix. That's it, output matrix. Great. Now if I hook a P window up to this, notice my P window is black. Here's a good example of this. P window is black. Hook up this now green cable out of my jit.world. It's green because it's a matrix. Plug it in here. Now my little P window goes grey. So that lets us know that our jit.world is rendering. And now that I've got this, I don't actually need my window. So I'm going to set visible to 0. So now our patch is nice and tidy. I've got a jit.world spitting out a matrix. Love it. Okay. We want to start working with text, so I'm going to grab my jit.gl.text2d object. I'm going to right click, open help. This just gives us some examples of working with text. You also notice here, this is a queue metro set up to a trigger bang arrays and a jit.gl.render. This is how you used to need to set up a GL rendering context. We don't need any of this now because we're working with the jit.world. So turn this on just to have a look at what's going on, make it say something. Hamburger fonts, color, position, scale. Okay, so I'm just going to copy a lot of this. I want this and this and this. I'm going to get the size, and I want a way of picking the font. I'll copy this. I'm going to paste it in here. All of this up to my text object. Hold shift to connect multiple objects. Housekeeping. Now, here's another thing that you might come across if you haven't worked much with jit.gl objects, is that it's a little bit of a cognitive jump after working in, if you've been working in Max and you started playing around with matrices, you're used to like piping, connecting everything together with patch cables, piping data from one thing to the other. When we're working in OpenGL, with jit.gl objects, we no longer need to do that because by creating a jit.world, we're creating what's called a GL context, and any other GL object is going to be associated with that GL context. So just having a jit.gl.text2d object in the same patch as my jit.world means that they're already sort of connected and talking. They know about each other. And when we start playing with this jit.gl.text2d object, we should see output in our little P window here. Let's make this a bit bigger. This is quite low resolution. Let's see what we get. I'm going to hit hamburger fonts. Hey, and we got some sort of font. some sort of text here. I'm going to change my color. Change my size. And I'm going to change my position. Looking at this sort of scale, what I'm finding is these @UI objects, this position here, this is an @UI object, probably the most unpronounceable object in Max. And as I was dragging things around, you can see the control is a little bit coarse. I want some fine-grained control over this. One way we can do that is just by making this object a bit bigger. And these are essentially float objects. If we hit an F to create a float object, operate the same way. You notice if I click and drag on the number, I'm going up in integers, up in steps, up in whole numbers. If I move my mouse over to the right a little bit, I start working on whichever decimal place my mouse is currently over. So you can get fine-grained control by clicking further to the right on the object. And we can do the same thing with this @UI object. So I've made it a bit bigger. Now I'm going to click and drag sort of over to the right to get some finer control. Pretty close. I'm also going to put in this placeholder text. So I've got this as bloop S001 E001. You know, these are fun little loops. So bloops, and S is going to be for series. Maybe I'll do a range of different sound banks, and E is for addition. So each one will be a unique temporal pattern and have unique visual components. So we've got bloop, series 01, sample set 01, and then addition 01. Let's put that in as placeholder text. Because I've got a space in my text, I need to surround it in quotation marks. If I didn't have those quotation marks, Max is going to treat this as a list. And so when I send it the command text, bloop S01 E01, that worked. Okay. I eat my words. Let's see what happens if I get rid of those forward slashes. Maybe something weird's going on. That's fine. Okay, cool. We just learned something. So you can send text, or you can send jit.gl.text 2D lists, and it will display those lists. Good to know. That makes life easy. So we've got our color, we've got our text, we've got our position approximately. Now let's pick a font. I really want something that'll work well as a small font. Start with any sort of mono. Change. One, see what happens. We're definitely changing. Mono, that will work small. I'm a fan of that. Thing over here. PSO, let's have a look. Console is bold. I wonder how we make it bold. Look at the reference. Like we can send it the message face, and one of them is bold, so we should be able to send it the message face bold. Let's try that. Looks good. Okay, I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to yes, I'm going to use this trick that I saw Ned Rush using. Oh my god, this was mind-blowing. I actually had a thought of submitting this as a feature request. I thought it would be so handy, and then I saw Ned Rush do it, and I was like, oh my god, it's already done. We can go to an object and say transform and hit changed attributes to arguments. This is going to take all of these UIs, all of the color and everything, and our font, and it's going to, hopefully, might not work for everything, it's going to instantiate an object with those as explicit arguments. This here, there we go. Okay, it's taken my position and it's sort of it's hard coded it in here. It's given us our color. We've got multiple colors. What's going on there? I don't think I need all of these. Let's get rid of this. I don't think I need my matte diffuse. 10. I think we're good. But a lot of this needs to be set as messages, so let's get rid of scale, let's get rid of things we don't need. I'm going to leave position there because I'm probably going to need to tinker with that later. Now font's a bit of a funny case. We might want to change the font later, but what I might actually do Let's create a message box and run this little set of objects into the right inlet of my message box, and I'm going to choose Consolus again. It's just stored that message in my message box. Load bang up to that. This is just so that if I want to change that font later, I still can. So I can go here, I can pick another font, then if I click this message box, it will set that font, but it will mean this message box will save with my patch. So I can experiment. I Consolus at the moment, and I want face to be bold. Light, although we don't need, and we'll play with the size. I think we're going to go with something that's like size 10. So we'll instantiate some of these. This text message will be dynamic. We generate the frame. Are we looking bad? Bad. Now what we want to do is superimpose these two frames together. I've got my background frame there, I've got my text frame, and I'm probably going to want to create a few more visual elements and compose them together as well. But this is the one part. You know, it's quite a large system that we're building with lots of moving parts, and if you're tackling a larger project or even a medium-sized project, even a small project, you want to break it down into little parts. Just tackle those parts one at a time. So right now the only thing that we need to be worried about is compositing our text with our image. Let's try that now. It's another jit.pix object to do this. Default, this jit.pix object, let's just have a look inside. So if I lock my patch and double click, by default we have a, this is essentially an additive blend mode. We're taking two matrices, we're adding them together and spitting them out. That's not going to work particularly well for us because this text is white and the background, so this text will be overlaid down here. The background at the moment is quite light. We could darken our background, even like flip it upside down, or but what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to a subtractive blend mode. Works. So I'll subtract white from that color. Again, I'm holding shift there to unplug effect between some patch cords. Useful. Let's run that again, see if we get some text. Ready. This is good. Notice our image is darker and our text is black. Black text I don't mind too much. Image is darker is because we set that subtract blend mode, and this image, our text image, notice the background is sort of grey, so we're subtracting a little bit of lightness out of our final frame. So I'm going to fix that by changing the erase color in my jit.world. This is essentially like our background color. There it is. I'm going to change it to 0001, so that's black with an alpha of 1. Ah, that's going to cause a problem as well, actually. We can have a look at that. Love problems. Okay, our frame's lighter again. Our text isn't particularly well positioned. Kinda don't mind that. I kinda don't mind that. It's like it's been overlaid on like CCTV. With that, I quite like that. That looks like it's working, right? Looks like it's working. Let's test it. I'm going to hit enable writing here. This part of my patch will write frames to disk. I'm going to hit go. Runs through our little sequence and goes blip 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 blip. And now it happens to be in another part of my computer. So check this out. Here are the frames we just rendered. Particularly great. Let's pop one open. Okay, so notice we've got a blank background, a transparent background. We've got text. The text is rendered. It's a little bit transparent, but it's there. But we're rendering on a transparent background. What's going on? What is going on? Well, comes down into our subtractive blend mode here. Yes. We're subtracting, when we're running a subtractive blend mode, what we're doing is we're doing it one plane at a time. So we're looking at one pixel, and then we're looking at the red pixel in one input and the red pixel in another input, and we're subtracting the second one from the first one. Then we're doing the same for blue, then we're doing the same for green, then we're doing the same for alpha. And our text frame here, this has an alpha of 1. By subtracting 1 from our alpha of our other image. And if we're subtracting 1 from our alpha of our other image, that's going to end up being 0. Because it's going to be 1 minus 1, we're going to get 0. So what we need to do is just enforce that we have an alpha of 1 here. So there's a bunch of ways to do it. I'm actually going to do this in a separate jit.pix object, and the reason I'm going to do that is it sort of frees up anything that happens upstream. I can do anything that I want, processing wise. I'm going to enforce that at the end when I'm rendering out my frame, I always want to have an alpha of 1. I don't want any transparency. So I'm going to it's like sort of putting a limiter at the end of your audio chain. I'm going to say jit.pix, shift, and just plonk it in here. Plonk. Now, there's a few ways to do this. I'm going to use the swizz object. And I'm going to swizz out RG and B. So I'm taking in my pixel, at a particular pixel right now. I'm taking out the RG and B components. I'm ignoring alpha. Whatever it is, don't care. Don't care. We're going to add our own alpha. It's going to give me RG and B. I wonder what would happen now. I'm going to go off-road. So what I'm going to do is now take my RG and B values, and I'm going to concatenate with a value of 1. So concatenation, just adding two vectors together. Concat, it's going to be our RG and B, and then to that we're going to add another value, another element in our vector. That will be our alpha. Now, no matter what I do upstream, my image is always going to be opaque. Let's run that again. I've still enabled writing. I'm going to hit go. I think this will overwrite the image that I've got loaded over there. So let's you can already see that it worked. Here's the folder. Notice now we've got nice opaque images. Didn't load up here, but came here. So we know that worked. Okay. Righty. What's next? What is next? I think something that I'm probably going to want to do, I need to spend a bit more time on this text component. I think I'm going to spend a bit of time just aligning things, and I'm going to create a range of backgrounds, and I'm going to create, so I think I'm going to spend the next period of time creating some elements, and then the next time I visit this project, I'll record my process again, and we'll be looking at more compositing and procedural compositing. So I think what we're going to do is set up some nested loops, iterate through those nested loops and say, I want this background with this text. Now I want another background with this text, and another background with this text. And now I want to add some other graphical element, and just run through all of those combinations. Or maybe do it randomly. Who knows? Who knows? You might know right now. Maybe I've already done it. You're in the future. Alright. For sticking around. Thanks for checking this out. I'd appreciate any feedback. This is quite different to what I've done in the past. And if it's useful, if there's something you think I can be doing better, I'd love to hear it. So again, thanks for sticking around. I think I've got to say, hey, if you're stuck around, you should subscribe. I don't know, that's something I'm supposed to say. But yeah, thanks for watching. I will catch you around.